Всім привіт! Дякую велике за те, що ви приєдналися. Знову ж таки, до нашої лекції з Canva. Сьогодні ми будемо говорити про те, як інтерв'ю успішно пройти, як на всі питання відповідати, як зробити так, щоб вас на роботу наняли. І ми дуже раді вас бачити знов з нами, якщо ви були на наших минулих лекціях. І я тоді передаю слово нашим гостям, передаю слово Canva, які з нами знов тут, вже на четвертій нашій лекції. Так, пишіть ваші коментарі у чаті, вони будуть відповідати. Всі питання ви також можете задавати в секції Q&A. І я переходжу зараз на англійську. So just did a little intro about what we're going to be talking with today. Once again, sorry for the technical difficulties. I think we're good to go. Just as a small technical thing, I think Chloe is back as a panelist. So if you're all good to go, guys, just let me know. Thanks.
All good to go. Thanks so much, Dana, for that introduction. And a massive thank you to everyone here for joining us today for our fourth webinar in our Job Seeking Masterclass series with goodjob. We're really enjoying spending time with each of you this month. And some of you may have joined us previously for our CV, PVP, and video cover letter masterclasses. If you weren't able to make it, I really recommend going back to watch the recording. I'm sure Dana has shared them in the channels. They're also on the YouTube links as well. So if you're joining us again, welcome back. Even if you're here for the first time, it's amazing to meet you. My name is Mike, and I'm part of the talent acquisition team at Canva. And we've been working closely with our friends at goodjob to pull together this masterclass series to share with you all. So very soon, my teammate Chloe and I will be sharing a deep dive session on how to ace your job interview. You'll also be joined by my teammates Emma, Nathalia, Chris, and Chelsea in the chat and Q&A. So feel free to send through any questions in the Zoom Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer them. As Dana mentioned, we are having some technical difficulties with the chat, so we'll just kind of play that by ear. But please make sure you put your questions in. We really do want to get to them all. So we hope that this month has been extremely helpful for you. We know it can be a really difficult time when you're searching for jobs and there's a lot of chaos in the world with new industries that you're going into, new cultures. It can be intimidating at the best of times. But look, like billions of people around the world, we're shocked and heartbroken to see the continued war crimes and the loss of thousands of innocent lives as Russia continues its illegal war in Ukraine. We stand vehemently opposed to the Russian government's continued acts of aggression, and we're committed to standing for peace and safety everywhere. A few months ago, our talent acquisition team started brainstorming ways that we could support the Ukrainian job seeker community during this challenging time. And it was then that we met our friends at goodjob and an amazing partnership was born. It means the world to us to be able to show our support for Ukraine and work with the truly incredible team to provide these resources to you all. So we did a poll previously. I'd love to see the response of that poll, if that's okay, Dana, if you can share that. I'm not sure if it's easy for you to share that, but I wanted to introduce Canva to you if you haven't yet heard of us, or if you're new to this webinar. Yeah, fantastic. Great to see who has been to these previous sessions and who's new. So I want to introduce Canva to you because for us, it's a big part of who we are. We're a visual communication platform with a mission to empower the world to design. So our goal is to make design accessible to everywhere, anywhere, and create anything they like. So we're a values-driven company, and these values on the screen are the lifeblood of every decision and every interaction at Canva, including how we interact with the world. So for a bit more context, we're an Australian-based company with offices and amazing team members all around the world, including UK, Europe, the United States, Philippines, and China. We've experienced enormous ongoing growth as a former startup, and our platform is used around the world in 190 countries, more than 100 languages, with approximately 180 creations being made in Canva every second, including some awesome CVs, mind maps, videos, and other tools to help you in your job search. So let's get started. I'm going to hand over to Chloe to kick us off.
Thanks, Mike. And hi, everyone. My name is Chloe, and I recruit for the engineering leadership team here at Canva. Today, we'll be running through how to prepare for your interview, what to expect during an interview, including types of questions, how to follow up after an interview, and we'll also share some additional resources, and we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end. So let's get started on how to prepare for your interview. Your CV has impressed the employer and you've landed yourself an interview. It's completely normal to feel nervous, but thorough preparation will help you feel more comfortable, confident, and in control during your interview. So how do you prepare? Drop your answers in the chat below. Let's have a look. Oh, Valeria, yes, you hit the nail on the head. Research company, that's what I would do too. Let's see if I get any more. Research weird questions they ask. Yes, I would do that too. Practice responses, prepare notes. Yeah, you've all hit the nail on the head. So for me personally, the first thing I would do is to research the company that I'm interviewing for. It's one of the best ways to become a standout candidate during the hiring process. And on the next slide, you'll see a few kind of tips and tricks of things that you could look into as well. The more you know about the company, the better position you'll be in to formulate good answers that will impress your interviewer as well. So here are a few things that I would do. So if we move to the next slide, you can have a look at the company website to find out about what products or services they provide. See if the company has a mission statement. Knowing the company's mission will help you understand what they care about most, so that you can also show these traits during the interview. You can also learn a lot about a company through searching through their social media accounts. Start with the LinkedIn company page just to learn a bit more about any recent launches and also a bit more about their employees too. You can also take a look at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where you might find blogs which will give you a better sense of the company culture and the types of people that work there. This will give you ideas of questions that you can ask during the interview too. You can also go to Google News to read some recent developments and press releases, so you can get a sense of what the company is working on. Your interviewer will be impressed that you know the latest news about them. Crunchbase is also a really good option. It's a platform for finding business information about private and public companies. You can set up a free account and keep track of the companies that you're interested in. For me personally, I love Wikipedia. So when I interviewed with Canva, I also looked up their Wikipedia website as well. So now just moving on to industry trends. So if you're attending a job interview in an unfamiliar industry, you should go beyond researching the company and just dig into a bit more about the industry as a whole. You can take a look at social media accounts of other businesses. You can read some trade publications as well. And you can also look at the other types of jobs that would be posted within the space just to get familiar with what other kind of positions they would recruit for. So the best tool for preparing for a job interview is the job description. Reviewing and analyzing the job description helps you focus on the role you're interviewing for and its requirements. It will remind you of what appealed to you about this particular position and why you thought you were well suited for this role. It can also help you assess what you don't know about the position. You can brainstorm a talking point for each skill listed in the job description. Focus on highlighting your accomplishments, milestones, and the goals that you've achieved using that specific skill. Don't feel disheartened if you don't meet all of the criteria. Be prepared with specific plans about how and where you can learn the skills that you may lack. Do you understand how the role fits within the organization? If information is missing, this can help you formulate questions that you can ask your interviewer as well. See what you can learn about the company culture so you can prepare yourself and prepare your answers to suit. Your CV is the tool that got you your interview, so make sure you review it before the meeting. Most interviewers will use it to frame questions around your skills and experience, so you should be prepared to speak about it clearly and in detail. If you stated that you achieved something, make sure you can clearly describe how you achieved it. Anticipate any concerns or reservations from the interviewer. Is there anything on your CV that is difficult to explain? Are you switching fields, or did you take a career break? Interviewers are likely to ask about these points, so prepare your answers in advance. I'll just share some of my own personal experience. So my second job in my entire career was as a human resources analyst in a bank. And unfortunately, I was actually only there for about 8 months. When this comes up during an interview, I tackle this head on and explain the situation. So I joined the organization because I wanted more experience within human resources. But after a few months, the department head had left and my role changed to be more admin focused, so a lot of scheduling and that kind of thing, which was not really in the career path that I really wanted to take. So I decided to leave, and my next role was actually back in recruitment. I've also got a 5-month gap between roles in my CV as well. And again, I tackle this head on and explain that I took a short career break just to recenter myself and also to do a bit of traveling. My tips for answering these kinds of questions is to give a short factual overview of the situation. So you can also learn a bit more about your interviewers, and you can do this because, and it's important that you know who you'll be meeting to make sure that you're prepared as well. You can look up the names that have been given to you on the meeting invite. And if you don't know who you're meeting, it's okay to ask. Ask the person who's scheduling the interview for their names, titles, and roles. You can do some research on the interviewers on LinkedIn to understand how their role relates to the position that you're interviewing for. This will also give you some insights into the company culture and give you a feel of the type of person who's likely to excel in this organization. You can read through any published articles written by your interviewer, and you can look at the type of projects or clients the organization works on and with. This can give you a better idea of how to focus your answers. Learning about your interviewer's background and interests will give you an advantage during the interview, as you might find common interests and will have a better chance of connecting with them. Handing over to Mike, who will share more about interview questions.
Thanks, Chloe. And thanks so much for sharing that, your personal story with those jobs. I think those insights are really good. I think a lot of people can identify with those. So when it comes to preparing for the interview, definitely getting ready for the questions is one of the biggest sections, and great to see in the chat too that you guys are on the ball with how to do that. What I want to do is really help you prepare for the questions that you're likely to get asked. So the first thing I'd advise around this is try and put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter or the hiring manager or the business owner, whoever it is that you are going to be meeting. Try and put yourself in their shoes and think about what their thought pattern is going to be like. They're thinking about finding the best person for the role. They're matching them to the job requirements. So the first section here, what do you think of the top 3 job requirements? So if you go through that job description, as Chloe mentioned, that is your best tool to prepare. What do you think the top 3 things are that they're looking for? Next question, number 2, is what skills can't be proven from your CV? So CVs are great. We did a whole webinar on that, but there are some things that a static CV document just cannot prove that people might be looking for. In particular, if you're looking at sales roles, verbal communication, confident presentations might be a key part of that. You can't convince someone that you can do that in your CV. So that will be part of the assessment in the interview. And thirdly, think about what questions would you have about your suitability. While a lot of people think, I'd be perfect for this job, I know I can do all the things in the job description, take a step back and think, if I was assessing my own candidacy for this role, what questions would I ask myself? Where is it not obvious that I'm the perfect fit for this role? So when it comes to the kind of questions you're going to get asked in the interview, there's a number of kind of questions that you might get asked. Here's a few examples of those kind of questions. So things like close-ended questions, open-ended questions, hypotheticals, and outside of the box. But the most likely, the biggest majority of time in your interview is likely to be spent with answering behavioral-based questions and situational questions. So studies have shown these to be one of the best indicators to how well you'll be able to succeed in the actual role. So these questions are questions starting with statements like, tell me about a time when, or describe a situation where you, or talk me through a project that, whatever the skills that they're assessing. Basically, a question that relies on you to refer back to an example of a situation from your past experience where you were required to outline your actions, your behaviors, and then the results that you achieved. So the question is, if these are the biggest part of your interview, how do you predict the interview questions that you're going to get asked so that you can properly prepare for them? First off, research common interview questions. So if you did a Google search, you can have a look at anywhere from 5 to 20 common interview questions, and you can kind of have a think through, do as much preparation as you want to. We've kind of listed 4 key common interview questions that you're likely to get asked in a lot of interviews. So the first one here is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So if I was to advise you on how to answer this question, I would really suggest Be honest, be authentic, and even show a little bit of vulnerability with that answer. Our whole team, we're recruiters, so I'm sure most of us have asked this question at some instances or something like this. And inauthenticity really stinks. You can tell when someone's just trying to, trying to think of a good term for it. You can tell when someone's just trying to give you the answer that you want to hear. What I would advise you to do is think of a genuine weakness that you're self-aware about, but then in your answer and how you respond to that, show that you are self-aware enough to identify a weakness, but also that you're working around that weakness. So you're still a high performer, even though you have strengths and weaknesses. You know what you need to do to substitute your strengths and your weaknesses. So for me, for example, as a recruiter, one of my weaknesses, I've actually got a really bad memory. As a recruiter, that's a really bad trait. So much of my job is dealing with people, details, interviews, facts, figures, salary numbers. So if I was to answer this question, I would be honest, I'd say actually I have a really bad memory. What I do as a recruiter to kind of substitute that is I take copious notes. When I'm interviewing someone, I'm furiously typing as much as I can and getting as much data from that interview on record so that I don't have to rely on my memory. I actually use a transcribing tool as well to help keep the exact transcript of that interview so that I can refer back to it if I need to. And then I could talk about, what else I'm doing. I'm, doing brain training games on my app on my phone from time to time to kind of improve my memory there. And when it comes to your strengths, definitely sell your strengths. This is the time to be loud and proud about how good you are, about the kind of value you can provide. The next question, if we move on, tell me about how you've handled a difficult situation. This is a really great question. This is a pretty behavioral-based question. My one caution here is be really careful about how you talk about your current employer, your current teammates, or your previous employers or previous teammates. If you talk negatively about them and you throw people down under the bus and you talk about how bad that team was and how those kind of things, it can present a really negative impact in the interview. It can be a massive red flag to anyone interviewing you. So be really cautious. Try and keep a positive tone. Definitely share a really difficult situation, but don't try and put others down and yourself up, but instead try and find out a situation that you had to work through these situations. Next question is, what are your motivators and goals? Motivations and goals. I would tie this back to the role you're applying for. So when it comes to your motivations, what got you excited when you read through the job description? What in there made you think, yeah, I really want to do this job. I really want to apply for this job because that'll be awesome. Try and tie it back to that job. And again, with your goals, try and tie your goals back to the company and that goal. So, you might have a personal goal that, by the age you're 40, you might want to retire and work part-time, living on a beach somewhere. That's not really a helpful goal to share with someone that you're interviewing with. Instead, if you talk about, I really want to get this job, work in this company so that I can progress in the company, and then I want to move laterally into this different section of the company, expand my knowledge. Again, if you can tie it to that company and their goals, it's going to make you more interesting for them. Well, finally, why do you want to work for this company? Definitely prepare for that question. This, again, is a great chance for you to show off how well you've researched the company. So pick out some things that might be a little bit obscure, things that you're really excited about in your research there. And next, I want to move on to talking about how to predict the behavioral-based questions that you might get asked. As I mentioned, this is likely to be the biggest section of your interview. So you can actually predict the kind of questions that you're likely to get asked by doing this tool. So this is a real job description from Canva for a front-end engineer here. Michael, who was in one of the other webinars, is recruiting for this at the moment. So if we have a look at this job description, we'll scroll down to the responsibilities and required experience section here. And what I've done is I've kind of read through this and I've asked myself this question: what are the three things that I'm likely to get asked about? What are the three most important things here for them at the moment? And I've picked out these 3 points I've highlighted. Communicate effectively with product managers and engineers across Canva when developing a solution. Seeks and incorporates diverse perspectives to address complex issues. Next is, you will be at home working in our core technology environment. Our core tech stack is TypeScript, etc. And then thirdly, working collaboratively with team members and communicating effectively. So let's have a look at how you can turn these 3 dot points into behavior-based questions so that you can practice for them. So up at the top here again, I've laid out these 3 dot points here. So the first one, communicate effectively. basically what I've done is I've just put describe a time when, and then the dot point. I've kind of shifted around some of the wording and the phrasing there as well. But here's the question that I've turned into from this dot point. Describe a time when you've had to communicate a complex technical issue with non-technical product managers or stakeholders. So you now have that question. You can go away and prepare that question. Chloe shortly is going to talk you through the star format, so you can practice preparing that question, answering that question in the star format. And let's look at the next question here, working in our core tech stack. So you could simply turn this into behavior-based questions saying, walk me through one of your recent projects that use TypeScript, React, or MobX. And then finally, working collaboratively, you could turn it into a question by saying, tell me about a time when you had an issue where working on a collaborative project, and how did you solve this? So that's how you can turn the dot points into questions so you can practice. So definitely practice. A few tips here on how to practice. It's always a good idea to practice with a friend or family member, or maybe even another work colleague or someone that you used to work with. Practice things like your eye contact, body language, and I'll hand over to Chloe for the actual in the interview process.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for sharing on how to prepare for questions as well. That was awesome. So next for us, let's just walk through some interview basics just to make sure that you are set up for success. The first thing we can tackle is online interviews. So since the pandemic, there have been more and more companies interviewing online. Here are some just quick tips and reminders for you. First of all, I would really recommend testing your audio and video setup before your interview. You can join the call link ahead of time to test your settings, and you can do this a day before or even an hour before. Second thing is to check your internet connection just to make sure it's strong enough to turn on your video. Next, I would probably recommend just testing and exploring the interview tool, especially if it's the first time using it, just so that you can get comfortable using it, and also especially if you need to share your screen. And finally, pick a quiet spot to avoid distraction and noise whilst you're interviewing. Now, moving on to face-to-face interviews. First, check the location of your interview. Regardless if you're commuting or driving, it would be good to get the directions all sorted out before the actual day, just to avoid being late. You can also do a practice run. Arrive early, especially if it's your first time in the area. Just leave enough time so you'll have enough time to get lost, just in case. This also gives you time to relax first before the actual interview. I try to arrive around 10 minutes or so before, just so I can decompress and start getting ready. Check the dress code of the company that you're applying for and make sure that you're wearing something that you'll feel comfortable and confident in. And lastly, be aware of your posture and your body language. Maintain eye contact with your interviewer whilst you're both speaking, and keep your head up and shoulders back while in a comfortable position instead of slouching. Now, I'm going to hand over to Mike, who's going to help us with dealing with our nerves.
Awesome. Thanks, Chloe. So nerves, let's just be real. Nerves are real. Everyone deals with nerves. We deal with nerves all the time as recruiters. Our team, before we started presenting this, all dealt with our own nerves as well. I want to ask you a question. What makes you most nervous before an interview? Drop a comment in the chat. I'd love to hear, what do you get nervous about? Are you nervous that you're going to say something silly, or you're going to have a slip of the tongue? Or are you nervous that you're going to get asked a really tricky question that you don't know the answer to? That's a great point, Maria. Your English level. To lose words, yeah. Forgetting my research, yep. Salary questions, that's a good one. Okay, fantastic. Drink a couple of tea. I don't know what that means, but I'm afraid of salary too. Okay, interesting. Can I just do a little quick little side note on that salary point? It seems like a lot of people get nervous about the salary question. And I guess it can be a pretty nerve-wracking experience how to answer that question when it comes to the salary. Let me just quickly address that now, because I don't know about that in our slides. But if a recruiter asks, what are your salary expectations? It's totally fine to be completely transparent and tell them what you expect. How you work out what that expectation is can be a little bit tricky. Definitely do your research, look at Glassdoor, Google. There's a couple of different websites you can look to see what a fair kind of estimation would be of what you're looking at. I would encourage, give them a bit of a range. If you want to hold your cards close to your chest, it's okay to turn that question back to the recruiter and say, yeah, look, I've got my expectations, but I'd love to know where the budget sits for this role, so I can kind of see how it aligns with my expectations. It's okay to ask that first. The recruiter may put it back and say, look, I just really need to know, what are your salary expectations? In which case, I think definitely share with them what your salary expectations are. You don't want to go too high, you don't want to go too low, which is why you want to try and do a bit of research on that. Chloe, any thoughts from your perspective on that question too?
I think honesty is always the best policy. In my view, I think you have to fight for what you want, and the best way is to partner with your recruiter or your hiring manager just to make sure that everyone's expectations are aligned as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And I think the reason why I would suggest try and find out a range for the budget is there can be huge variation, especially if you're coming to a new country or you're relocating or you're looking at a different industry. There can be such big salary differences that, you know, you could say a salary expectation that you think is reasonable and fair. Maybe it's a little bit more than what you're on at the moment, but it could be so far below where the recruiter's budget is, it could make you seem like a really poor candidate. Whereas if you ask within the range or even a little bit above the range, sometimes it can make you seem like a stronger candidate. So try and do your research, try and get a feel for where their budget will be beforehand. It is scary, but be confident and back yourself. My sister just got a new job and she answered this question. She was super nervous. And I told her, make sure you say this range. And it was a good amount above what she was currently on, but she'd been underpaid for 5 years. And I said, you need to tell them this. And she was so scared to do it, but she did it and there was no drama. She got the massive pay raise because she was underpaid. So definitely back yourself there. Anyway, moving right on. So we're going to explore some techniques that can help you calm your nerves. We've been talking about this even with our team, you know, our head of people at Canva, Jenny, and our head of talent acquisition, Amy, both talked about how they struggle with imposter syndrome. Myself included, I struggle with imposter syndrome too, and nerves and backing yourself. So definitely explore some of these techniques on how you can mitigate some of your nerves. So this is an interesting one. This is power posing. We practiced this before we started this webinar. And I don't know about you, Chloe. I feel powerful. I feel confident. So maybe it does work. So this has been some interesting research into, before you go into a presentation or an interview, practice for spending a minute or so in a kind of power pose where you're standing confidently, and it helps your mindset shift to a more confident mindset. Another point here is to really try and calm yourself. I'm sure you understand what it's like just before the interview. Your heart starts to race, your fingers start to tremble, your brain starts to go a bit crazy. Sometimes you just need to take some deep breaths, slow your mind, slow your body, slow your heart rate. There's great apps for that, or you can just do some deep breathing exercises. I think Chloe shared that was one thing that you like to do as well. Music is a great tool as well. You can find your relaxing playlist. Me personally, I like a bit of a pump up playlist. I will get the tunes cranked before I have an interview and really suck myself up so I'm passionate and excited for the interview. Physical activity can be a good way to get some of those nervous jitters that you feel in your body, get them out. You can do some stretches, you can do some yoga. For me, again, I like to get a little more pumped up and do some shadow boxing around my office before I go into an interview. But I think the key one here, probably the biggest one, is mindset. This is something that everyone struggles with, but you need to realize going into an interview a few things. You need to realize that you have incredible value, that you've achieved great things in your life, that you've got a lot to offer this company. So go in feeling confident. Even just this week, I was interviewing some candidates, 2 separate candidates, and they were both exceptionally talented, both exceptionally skilled in their fields, with a lot of experience. But the interview process was very different. One of them came in really confident from the start and spoke about their experience. The other person came in really, seemed like they were really kind of doubting themselves, like they were a bit intimidated by interviewing with Canva. And at the end of the interview, I realized that this person actually is a great candidate. But it took me the whole interview that I had to really work with the candidate and pull out information from them and realize that actually they're selling themselves short. They're a great candidate. And I have put them through for the final stages for an interview. Same with the other candidate, because they were great from the outset. But you want to convince someone from the very outset. So come in strong with your mindset, confident. So a couple of things that you want to do here. Really like the positive affirmation stuff. You need to be telling yourself positive things. Everyone has these thoughts in our head. Oh, I'm not good enough. What if I say something stupid? What if? You got to kind of take control of your brain a little bit and tell yourself, you know what? I'm going to do awesome at this interview. I've done my research. I've prepared. I've got this. I can do this. I would be a great asset for this company. And even if I don't get this job, I'm not going to let it discourage me. If you go in with a mindset like that, a growth mindset, you are going to do amazing in your interview. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to how to prepare and get your nerves out, but you find what works best for you. So once the interview begins, introduce yourself and your experience. Now, we've realized doing these webinars, there's some differences in cultures and what's common terminology in the job hunting process. So I want to ask what an elevator pitch is, or if you've heard of the term elevator pitch. If you've heard of the term elevator pitch, I'd love you to drop in the comments what it is. If you've never heard of that before, just shoot a quick no or yes, so I know how familiar it is to people joining from all over the world. Yeah, awesome. Seeing some great questions. It's how you sell yourself. Yep, have done that. Present yourself in 1 to 2 minutes. Awesome. Yeah, brilliant. Great to see that you guys have heard of what an elevator pitch is. Grab attention in 7 seconds. I like the 7 seconds. That's good. 1 to 2 minutes is good too. Self-presentation. Yeah, fantastic. So an elevator pitch is, the terminology comes from if you're in an elevator standing with someone and you've got 4 floors to go up and they ask you, hey, what do you do here? How would you tell them what you do in a convincing way? So basically, elevator pitch is a compelling introduction. I would argue this is probably one of the most important sections of your whole interview, because an interviewer is likely to come up with an assumption of whether they're going to progress you or not within the first 1 or 2 minutes. As I mentioned, that example for me previously, I had that interview with one of those people who in the first 2 minutes, I thought, I'm not going to be progressing this person. But after the interview, I did end up progressing them because they're a great candidate, but they actually did really bad at this elevator pitch section. So it is really important. You want to convince someone straight away. So a personal elevator pitch is a compelling introduction about your personal value proposition, what you do, what sets you apart, and it's intended to quickly captivate your audience. So if you're a part of the personal value proposition webinar, you'll be ready to go with a really great elevator pitch. If you haven't seen that webinar, I do encourage you to check that one out. So this is usually precursed by one of these questions. Whenever the interviewer says, tell me about yourself, or walk me through your experience, or something like what brought you here, then that is your moment to shine. Don't fumble through that section. Be ready and hit that hard with your elevator pitch. And I'll talk through a couple of do's and don'ts here. So first off, make it meaningful to the person you're speaking to. So consider not just what you do, but how what you do could help the person you're pitching to. Next is tell a story. Paint a picture of what you do in order to help your pitch get noticed. This might involve highlighting an interesting accomplishment or simply sharing your unique perspective on your profession. Next is be specific. They want to know and understand what your expertise is. Next is be authentic. This one is really important. Be authentic when you're sharing your elevator pitch. Give employees a sense of who you really are. After all, you're looking for a career opportunity that's a good fit for you. So giving some insight into who you are and what motivates you is important. Use a conversational tone. So avoid using language that's too rigid or formal. Be wary of statements coming off like a sales pitch. Even though it is a bit of a pitch at its core, you want it to sound natural. You want it to sound conversational. And also I would say here, don't read it from a script. So you don't want them to ask you, so tell me about yourself. And all of a sudden you open up your notepad and you start reading out your elevator pitch that you've written down previously. A couple of other don'ts. Don't go into too much detail. You don't need to use too much jargon. Just be aware you might be speaking to a business owner or someone higher up who might not understand the extreme technical aspects of your role. Don't take too long. This is a big one. When someone asks you, tell me about your work experience, they don't want you to tell them for 10 minutes and walk through every single job you've had for the last 10 years, where you studied, where you went to high school, where you went to primary school. Keep it short, 30 seconds, 1 minute is great. If they want to know more detail, they will follow up and they will ask you for more detail. But you don't want to leave them there thinking, oh, when is this person going to stop talking? You don't need to focus too much on the years of experience. It's not your longevity in a job that will make you noticeable, but it's what you did with that time. And just be careful about cliche statements like, state of the art or outside of the box. They can make your pitch seem kind of dull as well. Now, here's an example from Chris, who actually helped really spearhead this whole webinar, but couldn't be here because of the time zone. So check this out.
Hi, my name is Chris Harris, and I'm based in Sacramento, California. I work remotely here in Sacramento, and I share my home office with my wife, my dog, and our 1-year-old daughter. I've been a recruiter for over 10 years now, and I love connecting talented people with opportunities in the technology space. Previously, I carried senior recruiting roles at Adobe Systems and Facebook, and I'd love to take the skills and experiences that I've learned at these great organizations and apply them to a high-growth tech startup where I could help build the company from the ground up.
Awesome. So that's a great example of the elevator pitch. Short, sweet, gave me some personal info, but kept it mostly relevant to the job he was applying for. So when it comes to how to prepare this, how to practice this, it's a good idea to seek feedback. So practice your elevator pitch in front of someone that you trust. And it can be hard to objectively see what skills you have that have helped other organizations. So ask people that you trust for those that feedback. Practice reading it out loud, write it down, say it as many times, say it to the mirror. But then another good idea too is to take it out and field test it. Go to a networking event or a friend's barbecue and practice your elevator pitch when it doesn't matter so much. The more you practice saying it, the more comfortable you'll feel. And when it comes to polishing, refining, keep iterating your elevator pitch. You can keep changing it as you go. A great way to simulate the stress of an interview that I've found, and I really advocate for this, is video yourself doing your elevator pitch. And I can tell you now, no one likes watching themselves back after they video themselves. Whenever I do this, and I've done this a lot because I know it helps me, whenever I do this, I watch the video back and I think, oh man, I just talk so much. I waffle, I say a million times, I'm not keeping it relevant. I go off on random little tangents. So I video myself again and again and again so I can get it refined and be concise with my words and be confident with them. So I really advocate videoing yourself over this. And now over to Chloe for the Q&A section.
Amazing. And just to everyone writing in the chat, unfortunately, Mike and I can't reply. So I know there's been a few questions for both of us, but I will just address Vasilina. I'm really sorry if I just said your name wrong as well, who asked, how long should it be to not overwhelm the interviewer? So how long should an elevator pitch be? Look, there's no right or wrong answer. It doesn't have to be 7 seconds. Mine personally is about 2 to 3 minutes because I do tell my life story in one go. So there's no right or wrong. Don't just try to be concise, be factual, and just remember the tips that Mike shared with you. So now I'll just move on. Your introductions are done, which is amazing. Let's move on to tackling questions. And the first thing to do is ask you all a question. Have you heard of the STAR interview technique? If you have, pop it in the chat. Valerie on fire as always, answering really quick. Yes, but never used. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a fair few yeses. Stick with me and I'll walk you through it as well. So for us, STAR interview method is a technique you can use to prepare for behavioral and situational interview questions. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Interviewers ask situational and behavioral interview questions to determine whether you're a right fit for a job. This method will help you prepare clear and concise responses using real-life examples. At Canva, we recommend taking time to reflect at the conclusion of your answer, just to highlight any learnings that you may have had or things that you would have done differently as well. So if we break this down, situation is around setting the scene and giving context. Task is describing the task, including any challenges and expectations. Action is around explaining the thought process, what you did and how you did it. R is for results, what was the outcome? And then the second R is around reflection, what were the key takeaways? So here is an example situational question for everyone. Can you tell me about a time when you went above and beyond to deliver excellent customer service? And we have Chris again, who's going to give us an example answer.
When I was working at Company X, we were preparing a video presentation for a client when I learned that someone on their team was deaf. The presentation was due the next day in the morning, and I was the only one left in the office at 5 p.m. I realized there was only one solution, and that was for me to stay behind in the evening and add the captions myself. It took a few hours, and around 8 p.m., I was finally done. Then I let our team know about the update. In the end, the client enjoyed the presentation. They were very impressed and surprised by our attention to detail, and we ended up closing the deal soon after. Looking back, if I could change anything, I would have researched the client team sooner. We could have identified the deaf meeting attendee and added captions to the presentation as a team.
Awesome. So let's break this down. The situation for poor Chris was a member of the client team was deaf, and unfortunately, Chris was the only one left in the office after 5 p.m. The task for this was to stay late and add captions to the presentation. Chris's action for this was to spend extra hours adding captions to the presentation and then informing the team. The results were that the client enjoyed the presentation and then ended up closing the deal soon after, which is a great result. And Chris's reflection is he would have researched the client team sooner, just so he could have known who would be attending the meeting and what requirements they would have had. So here are just a few hot tips. You want to keep it relevant. Your answer should be related to your position and show that you come equipped with skills that would be helpful to the job that you're seeking. Have a few examples ready. It's a good idea to have a few examples ready that follow the STAR method. This way you can tweak and adapt your answer on the go depending on the question. Give proper context. When talking about the situation, try to summarize the build-up to your story in 1 to 2 sentences and only provide information that's relevant to the question. And finally, show your work. It's your time to shine. Don't be afraid to go all out and show how you made all the difference. Awesome, that's all the questions done. Mike, what are your tips on how to finish up an interview?
Awesome. Look, definitely at the end of an interview, that is when you really need to make the most of the opportunity to ask questions to the employer. And I've seen some great questions in here about, what questions should you ask? How do you ask questions? Again, this is a really crucial part of the interview. This is a time when usually the interviewer will give you control of the interview again. They'll say, look, do you have any questions for us? That's your chance to really do that. So why should you ask questions? So an interview is a two-way street. While it's true that the interviewer is assessing you, this is also your opportunity to assess the company and the role you're applying for. And I just want to say a quick caveat here is don't just go for any job just because they make you an offer. I know it can be tempting to do that, but you do want to find a job that is good, aligned with your values, and something that's going to be meaningful work for you as well. So number 2 is asking for more context about the role. The company or the team will help you get a better glimpse of the work setup, which can help you in your preparation for the next interview stages. So asking good questions are indicators that you've done your research and you're interested in the company, and this will help you put you in a good light and leave a lasting impression. So how do you ask good questions? So I know there's a lot of advice out there. These are the top 2 interview questions you should ask every time you go in for an interview. My advice on some of those questions is it's better to be relevant and context specific rather than just have a blanket. I always ask these questions. So have a think about this. When asking questions, refer back to the research that you've done before and build out your questions from there if there's something that you're curious about. So a little pro tip here is ask questions that show your business acumen. So show them that you're thinking about how this role will affect the bottom line. And another little tip here is ask questions that will show you're already thinking about yourself in this role and how you can be a high performer in that role. And next point here is lean on your recruiter for help. Your recruiter is there to set you up for success. If you think there's something unclear, then ask away. You can ask for context about the interview stages or who will be your interviewers or what they might be assessing you for. Ask for feedback too, so you know how to prepare yourself for the following interviews. Sometimes a really great time to ask for feedback is at the end of your initial phone call with a recruiter or a recruiter screen. You can get some real-time feedback from them there and prepare you for the next stage. And over to Chloe for following up after the interview. Chloe, you're still on mute there.
I'm a technical recruiter who can't use my Zoom, so sorry about that, everyone. So you've nailed your interview. What's next? If you just finish that. So you can follow up following up, you can connect with your interviewers on LinkedIn and connect with them. And you can also send them a thank you email. If you haven't heard back within 5 days, you can follow up again and just see if there's an update for you. So what does a thank you email look like? Here's an example. You want to keep it short, share a line about what you enjoyed learning about during the interview. And finally, you want to add a prompt to let that recruiter or hiring manager know that they can reach out to you if they need to. And lastly, I'm a big reflector, so I like to reflect on a lot of things. But these are a few things that I think about after an interview. So what questions did I answer well? What could I have prepared more for? I also have a think about what I learned during the interview and if it was the right role for me. And last but not least, I prepare myself for the outcome. If my interview was successful, then amazing. But if it's not, it's still a really great learning experience and will prepare me for interviews moving forward in the future. All right, back to Mike. He's going to share some resources with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chloe. So as I mentioned before, we do have a workbook that we want to share with you afterwards. So that'll be available to you. We really want you to be able to take this back and look at the learnings that we've had through this webinar and get in there and get interactive. There's sections for you to write some questions yourself, answer questions, practice your STAR behavioral-based questions and how you're kind of going to map out your questions, your answers. And then it gives you a chance to, again, record yourself, your elevator pitch. You can go through that in a lot of detail. At the start of this resources too, we have a bit of an interview checklist. So before you go for any interview, you can tick through that checklist and make sure that you are all good. Now, I want to move over to the Q&A and ask one of these questions we received before the webinar started. So, Chloe, I'll shoot this one to you. Is it okay when I'm asked to do a test assignment?
Yeah, I think so. I am a technical recruiter, so this is quite common for kind of IT and software engineering roles. But I have previously also worked in banks too, and it's becoming more common for those kind of organizations to ask to do a test assignment as well. My advice for tackling this is just to get as much information as possible from the recruiter or the hiring manager. And you want to understand what are the expectations of the test and what are they looking for? What are the results that they're looking for? And then from there, just prepare as much as you can. A lot of things are online, so you can see if there are some like example tests that you can do online just to get you familiar with the questions and what they're looking for there as well. At the same time, though, if you do receive a test assignment and it doesn't align to your skill set and it doesn't make sense for you to take it, I would refer back to the recruiter or hiring manager and just double check with them on the requirements there.
Great. Chloe, can I ask too, what's too much if you're interviewing and someone asks you to do something and you think, oh, what's too much an unrealistic expectation from an employer?
I think it depends on the candidate as well. I mean, I also have been a candidate and been asked to take technical tests, and it depends on my situation, right? So, you know, if the test is 3 hours long, but I've got, you know, kids to feed and dogs to walk and other things that are going on in my life, then I may not have that time to actually give to them to take it as well. So I think it depends on everyone's personal preference. What they can accept, but also have that open conversation with your recruiter or your hiring manager. If the take-home task or test assignment is just too much for you to handle, there may be a way around it. There may be an opportunity to break it down. There may be other ways that you can kind of achieve those kind of test results, but through a different method. So definitely refer back to the recruiter or the hiring manager for that one.
Awesome.
All right, Mike, it's you're up next. So this is a good one. How do you answer the question, what are your greatest achievements, if there are none?
Yeah, I love seeing this question. And before I answer the heart of the question, I just wanted to really address, first off, that's never the case because everyone on this webinar has achieved great things, has had great impact, has added value to your family, your community, to places where you might have studied or worked. So first off, again, that growth mindset is so important here. You might not have had a fantastic career history to be able to refer back to, but you have achieved good things. So make sure you get that mindset that you're coming from a point of you're continuing to grow, but you've got things that you can pull from. So a quick tip on this is it's a really good idea. You can start this right now, open up a note on your phone or a document on your computer, and maybe once a month or so, start listing out things you've achieved for that month. Ideally in a professional sense, what have you achieved? What have you done well? What KPIs have you hit? Where have you delivered value to the business you're working in? What are you proud of? You'll find after 1 or 2 years work experience, it can be really hard to remember back, to 2 years ago, what you were proud of, what achievements you actually had. So that can be a great way to keep a bank of those things. But I'd move on to say, if you're struggling, obviously the person who asked this question is struggling. They're thinking, I haven't really got anything that I'm super proud of to showcase in an interview. That's okay. That's totally okay. You might have come from no work experience or work experience only in like hospitality or fast food. For me, my first job was in pizza delivery. So that was pretty much my only job. I just waited for the pizza to be cooked and chopped and put in a box, and then I just drive it to the person's house. So you could think there's nothing to kind of pick out from there. But if I was to use that in an interview, I would say, you know what? I delivered 100% of the pizzas to my customers on time and hot, ensuring a really positive customer experience. And there's proof of that in the case that I always got tips when I delivered pizzas. So you can kind of turn even mundane things into great achievements. If you add metrics, you add data, and you talk about the impact to the final customer. So what I would say is try and keep it as relevant as possible. Obviously, work experience achievements are the most relevant. That's the best case scenario, but you might not even have a job as a pizza delivery driver to refer to. Maybe you can talk about some of your study achievements. Did you win any awards when you were studying in school or in university? Again, if you don't have anything that you can talk about there, maybe you can talk about some of your sports achievements or other hobbies that you're a part of. If again, kind of going down the less relevant path is friendships, family achievements, things that you've done for people around you. But I would really stress, try and find the most relevant achievements and highlight them. I hope that answered the question. Now over to Chloe for, how do you answer the question, why should we hire you?
Before I tackle this, thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. That was so awesome to hear about your pizza delivery story. Very inspiring. I love it a lot. So back to this one, how do you answer the question, why should we hire you? I don't love this question personally. I think it's a bit tricky, but you can break it down into a few different things. So what is the interviewer looking for in this question? It's really around, I guess, the confidence in your abilities, or maybe they also want to make sure that you've researched and understood the job as well. I think the way I would approach this is to kind of structure my answer very similarly to the elevator pitch. So go in confident, show that you've researched the company and the job, but also what it involves, and demonstrate why you're a great fit for the job. You can show your motivations and your interest in the role as well. I think this question can also come up in a few different ways as well. So it could be like, why would you be a good fit for this position? What makes you unique? Why are you the best person for this job, etc., etc. So yeah, I think loop it back to the elevator pitch and just remember that you're the perfect fit for this role.
Awesome.
Okay. Mike, last one to you. What are some of the red flags you should be aware of during the interview?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I'm glad someone asked this, and a bit of a tricky one too. But look, definitely, I saw some posts in the chat about this. If you're being asked questions that make you feel really uncomfortable and you're kind of questioning, are they even allowed to ask this question? That's a really big red flag. So if they're asking questions about your race, your religion, your age, your marital status, or other personal things like that, that is a red flag. In a lot of countries, a lot of states, those questions are actually completely illegal. If they're not illegal, you can push back. If you feel uncomfortable about a question you're getting asked, just say, I'd rather not answer that question. And that's totally fine. I wouldn't be too stressed about that discounting you from the job. If the interviewer is asking you really dodgy questions, it might be a bit of a warning sign that you should dodge that one anyway. If you find out that the company or role has a high turnover rate, that can be something you can try and pry into a little bit. So I recommend to always ask why the position is available and how long it's been open for. Also pay attention to how long your interviewer has been with the company. So you can do a bit of LinkedIn stalking, LinkedIn research there as well. Another thing that could potentially be a bit of a red flag is if you're expected to work overtime regularly, a job that expects you to work outside normal hours, nights, weekends. There's no kind of work life or flexibility there. If your interviewer seems unenthusiastic or speaks poorly about the company or people they work with, I advise to ask some questions about the company culture and the team. You can even ask, what do you love about working here? Or what's your favorite thing working here? Sometimes you can even ask genuine questions about, look, what would the biggest challenges be when I join this company? And that can be a really good question because, if you were to have an interview with someone at Canva, we can be really transparent about that. So look, Canva is a fast growing company. So there will be challenges with things changing. Often we need to stay agile, and that can help you determine whether the company is right for you, because that really is a key part of the interview process as well. And just quickly checking through the chat, I think those are most of the questions. Yeah, awesome. Anything you wanted to add to any of that, Chloe?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think I did see a question fly by about asking us what made us nervous. This makes me nervous. So this presentation makes me nervous, but we did practice some deep breathing and power posing beforehand as well. So I think we've got most of the questions done. I'll just quickly wrap up then. So for what's next in the webinar series, we've got one more left to go, which is next week, which is mastering your job search. So please come along if you can. And from Mike and myself and the greater team, we just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope you learned something and have something to take away. And we wish you all the best for your interviews moving forward as well.